everyone, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. Today we're doing an author interview, and I'm super excited to welcome Vanessa Vershaw to our podcast. And Vanessa, we always like to start with not a question that I've shared with you, but we always like to start with, how's your week been?
It's been short, which has been lovely. I've really enjoyed just coming back off the long weekend, and I've had time. I've been travelling for work. I've been in the US. I know that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other podcast.
We'll have to do that.
But just back from the US and spending time with my beautiful family in Perth, Western Australia. So it's just been wonderful to reconnect and have some special time.
That sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
So let's start, and I'll get you to introduce yourself to our audience. So love to know a little bit about you and your journey so far.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a bit of an interesting trajectory. Obviously, I'm an author. It's the book we're talking about today, The Sisterhood Paradox, which is out, officially on May 1st. And I've written a couple of others as well, Unreasonable Ambition and Bitch Fight, which was the first one. But I didn't start off in life writing books. So I started off in life actually as a cadet journalist with the ABC until, let's just call an attack of conscience, and we'll leave it there, led me to go back and become an organisational psychologist. So an organisational psychologist is essentially somebody who is like a doctor of organisations, goes in, figures out what's working, figures out where there's pain, and then seeks to work with the leaders of that organisation to address it and to fix it so that everybody's happy and thrives. So I've been doing that for the last 20 years, all around the world, leading a global advisory practice, working with leaders on strategy, culture, and high performance development. So that's essentially what I do for a cracker and what my first book was about. As an organisational psychologist, the tips and techniques, what they don't tell you about how to build a mindset that can weather any storm, any weather conditions, because I believe that we can do it. So a bit of a different one this time, but nonetheless coming from 20 years behind the scenes, seeing the best and the worst of humanity, and being in the privileged seat that I have of hearing people's truths. So they used to call me the dream weaver. I spent time in North America. How do I help people evolve and achieve their dreams? And sometimes that means blowing up the demons in their life. And so great segue for the conversation today.
I love that. I was about to say great segue. So I'd really love for you to share with our listeners and our viewers about your new book, The Sisterhood Paradox, and particularly why you wrote it, because it's a really fascinating topic and not one that I've read about before. So I really love the perspective you've taken.
Thank you so much, Nat. And you absolutely nailed it even in the question, because so a couple of things. I'll start with the fact that about 6 months ago, I was sitting down and I've been working quite heavily as a kind of on the side with women. I don't get to work with that many women, I'll be honest with you. I haven't over the years compared to men, because when you're working at the C-suite and board level, unfortunately, there are more men than women. And so that's been my life. So I've, sitting there and doing my bit for gender equality and trying to help women kind of get a voice and seat at the table, because I know what it takes and how to do it. And the latest stats came in from globally from the World Economic Forum about how we're actually doing. And look, we've spent the last 10 years focused on this. There's been a lot of activity, a lot of focus, although, different situation at the moment. And the global report showed that we'd actually only moved the dial by 1% globally in the last decade.
Wow.
Ouch. Ouch. And in Australia, we've actually come to a standstill. So we've actually completely, in some cases, even gone backwards. And I sat there and I literally was brought to my knees. And as somebody who works heavily to advocate for women and men for thriving experiences at work and in life, I said, we're still not addressing the one conversation, the one lever that we potentially have yet to pull that could make the difference between women finally getting a Guernsey and evolving into the domain that they deserve and not. And that is the sisterhood paradox. And that is the very real and deliberate goings on of some women to intentionally stop other women from progressing. And this is not me. This is not me just pulling it out of somewhere. The stats on this are clear. So I'm a scientist practitioner, and here's where we are. You ready for this? Are you ready? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So of all the stats, are bully other women at twice the rate of other sexes. Wow. Women are bullying women 70% of the time at work. That's the reality. That's shocking, and it's absolutely shocking. And it's why 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Bitch Fight. Now, I haven't called it that.
I love that name.
Right? But at the time, it was appropriate for where things were at. Nobody was talking about it back then, and nobody's talking about it now either. And so I figured, you know what? It's probably time for me to take a look at how the world has changed, why we're still not talking about it, and whether the tactics and the way women are going after other women sometimes has evolved, because there have been some significant shifts. And so the sisterhood paradox is about this paradox of the belief that we have that other women should lift and support us. And by the way, I do believe that, because there are so few of us in decision making. I do believe that, but not everybody agrees with me. Okay, so I'm just going to say that. But if you do choose to lift another woman, or if you do choose to interact with other women, make sure that it's positive and don't do the opposite. So this is what the sisterhood paradox is about. I'm not saying that every woman should lift other women, although that's where I stand, but don't take them down either. And so that's the paradox of the sisterhood.
That's nice. I can't wait for this conversation then. Then what are some of those unspoken, because clearly this is not something that is in a normal conversation, the challenges that women do face from their female colleagues when they're not necessarily trying to support and lift other colleagues up?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So what's really interesting is, I'll answer that in a couple of ways if I could, Danette. Firstly, the big issue that you have is that not all aggression is created equal. There are lots of different types. And unfortunately, what's happened is that because people don't understand the different forms of aggression and that men and women do it differently, so here's the big kicker. So men tend to be very in your face. It's direct. They get it out there and it's done, right? Women aren't as direct. They're very indirect, and it's why it's so hard to spot. But also, in addition to that, there are lots of different forms. So the problem has been that people in the workplace just call everything bullying these days. Bullying is not always the case. So your ability to understand the difference between female bullying and other types of female on female aggression is where we're getting it wrong already, because depending on which one it is, our ability to name it and call it and identify it, it's going to require a very different solution. So in the book, I talk through the different forms. So for example, incivility or somebody being rude to you is not necessarily bullying. It just might mean that that woman is a jerk, all right? Does that mean you are being bullied? No, it doesn't. But the problem is, because we don't know the difference, the word bullying has been weaponised and put into the one bucket for all forms of transgressions, women against women, because that's what we're talking about. The only time that calling you a name or being horrible to you is going to be bullying is if it is persistent, consistent, and with the intention to harm over time. And that is the difference. Eye rolling, calling you a name is not necessarily bullying unless there are those other psychological factors at play, whether you are actually actively targeted by another female to take you down or to sabotage you or to prevent you getting something in some way or stop you rising the ranks. And that is what is different about it. And we have to know the difference. The other thing that's happened as well, Danette, is bullying has evolved. So there's a couple of things happening. With the advent of the internet, we now have bullies with greater reach through cyberbullying. We have trolling. We have the incident, the absolutely catastrophic incident recently with a little girl in Sydney who was cyberbullied by other girls. You know, people have access to these types of tools. We also have mobbing. So bullying has evolved, female mobbing. Mobbing is when somebody coerces or recruits other people to do the bullying for them. and then they end up looking like scot-free and nothing sticks to them. So the bullying is almost like the mistress puppeteer calling the shots behind the scenes, coercing their staff or people to go and target a particular individual, usually around a common enemy or dislike. They usually use gaslighting or white-handing techniques to create dissension or a feeling like this person isn't worthy. Slut-shaming is another technique. Putting the person's question into competence to rally the troops and get support for an en masse mobbing attack where the bully ends up walking away scot-free. And another one I'll mention, and this is the one we don't talk about, which is even more insidious, and that is the silent treatment. Now, believe it or not, the silent treatment is one of the most toxic forms of bullying typically engaged by women on women. So you may have heard of ghosting with online dating. Okay. It's a similar kind of thing where you've had a relationship with somebody at your place of work, you've worked together, you know each other, and all of a sudden they stop talking to you. They go silent. They ignore your calls. They don't text you back. They literally socially ostracise you and give you the silent treatment. Now, the problem with all of these forms of bullying, Danette, is that women are more psychologically impacted when they are bullied by other women than by men. The impact is far greater, and it goes back to the sisterhood paradox, because innately our inherent belief is that a sister won't do it to us.
Yeah, true.
Right? So it's akin to the ultimate betrayal. And so psychologically what we're seeing is a high incidence of mental health concerns, post-traumatic stress disorder, burnout, and the reason why I wrote the first edition in 2016, suicide.
Wow. Oh, what horrible outcomes from what I assume is something that we could change over time.
100%. But the issue, Danette, to your point, we need to change it, is if we don't actually know what it is, if we aren't skilled or educated in being able to name it and identify it, or even when we're a target, because here's the paradox as well. Often women, when they're being bullied by another woman, will say, it's not really happening. And this is the sister.
More about that one.
Right? Well, it goes back to the sisterhood paradox again. I mean, a woman wouldn't do that to me. Women are kind, they're caring, they're compassionate. Well, not everybody is, you know. And so a lot of the times women will discount what they're going through, rationalise it, and actually take the blame themselves and say, well, actually, it is me. I probably deserve it. Or just say, well, you know, I think probably this thing will pass because, you know, she's a woman, she doesn't really mean it. And then they won't seek the help that they need. And this is the other stat in all of my research that comes out in the sisterhood paradox. Women actually aren't getting help. They're not getting help. They're preferring to soldier on or rationalise the experience. And what's happening then is it's manifesting in some very serious psychological ramifications and trauma, health concerns, and in some cases, suicide ideation and passing. And it's really interesting. I've had quite a number of clinical psychologists running practices who read my first book come to me and say, thank you for writing the first book. And this is in North America. Because you've named this, I've had several clients not actually follow through. I think, geez, you know, I actually didn't realise when I wrote the first book that I would be saving lives because of it. But in fact, it has. And so a couple of levels for this new edition. One is to talk about how things have actually evolved and gotten more sophisticated. Bullies have become more sophisticated. What are some of the other perils around, like the cyber world and technology? And this might be the very, very, very well the one lever we've yet to pull to actually lift women, not limit women in the workplace. And as a result of this, I got invited to speak about this in Davos at the World Economic Forum in January.
Congrats.
Thank you. And the response was overwhelming. Overwhelming. That the sisterhood paradox and the sisterhood ceiling is one that we must bust through because it is really holding us back.
Love that. That's so awesome that you got to go and speak there too. I'm so
I did.
excited for you.
Thank you. It was lovely.
So my next question is, how do we get to the root cause of what actually creates this sisterhood paradox?
Yeah, what a great question. And, you know, I could just say to you, because this is really interesting, there is a theory, and I'm just going to throw this because it's really controversial.
Okay.
You know, women are just innately driven to compete against one another. You know, and this is that it's a biological drive, a survival of the fittest in competition for scarce resources because there are so few of us at the top. And look, that's definitely something to consider. There is might be an innate drive. And in fact, in writing the book, I ended up speaking to Dr. Jane Goodall.
Oh, I love her.
Do you know who she is? Who is she?
Yeah, she's the woman with the gorillas. Is it the gorillas?
Yeah, so she's the gorilla expert.
Yeah, she's lovely.
She's amazing. And so she's at Taronga Zoo, and I spoke to her and a colleague of hers, and their belief is, and they've got lots of evidence to suggest, that women are innately driven to compete against each other, whether it's for voice, whether it's for a mate, because they are typically the subservient sex. All right? So there's different, right? Makes sense. There's an argument for that. Okay. So if that's the case, does that mean that there's nothing we can do? Because that would suggest that we're kind of damned if we do, if we're damned if we don't. And I don't agree with that. I think that we've evolved as a species to a place where we have free will and we have intelligence. And so unlike the bonobo chimps, you know, or unlike the animals of this world, you know, God gave us a brain. And so part of it is being conscious of when we are triggered into this survival instinct that can occur because organisations are naturally set up for us to compete. They are, because there are so few of us. The conditions are not, the cultures and the conditions in organisational life and the current male-dominated leadership means that we are so few.
Makes
so
sense.
we're already starting with a disadvantage. But I think what I'm trying to say is if we are aware of this, and if leaders in organisations are aware that this is naturally the environment that's set up, how can we give time and energy to create cultures where we can combat this? Because we're clever, we're better than this, you know. How do we get on the front foot of this chess game? Where we, you know, like, and that's the challenge I set for all women, is to say, if you want to see us represented on the broader scale, if you want to shift the dial, if more of us want to have a voice, which we do, then we have to work together. Because there's dominance in numbers. And the more of us that are aware of these inherent biases that can exist, why they exist, we get it, that we're in an environment that is cultivating this. But if we're aware of it, how do we change the game to work to our advantage? And we're only going to do that by stopping and saying, you know what, I'm going to take control of this. I'm aware of my inherent potential biases, and by the way, not all women have this, but some more than others, okay? Some more than others, for sure. But how am I going to reprogram myself to become aware and also to intentionally create cultures on my watch that don't do this, where there is psychological safety, where women and men can speak their truth, can call something out when it's not right. How can we create cultures where that trust and that courage and bravery is something that we nurture and that we encourage? The reason why women haven't also talked about this stuff and why it's not on the radar, honestly, and this is an important part as well, is that psychologically, here's part of the cultural shift we need. When women out another woman, they are really ill-perceived and damned by men and women alike. So men will typically view them as incompetent. Here we go. Here's a bitch fight, which is why I called it bitch fight. Here's women just being mean to one another. They're catty, they're rude. They discount that anything's actually happening. It's just two women, you know, being overly emotional, getting into a fight. Now, even to say that to you makes my blood boil, Danette.
Yes.
But when you read the book, you'll see so many men that I interviewed also for this book said that, you know. They said either it didn't happen, or when it did, they said, oh, well, that woman's just useless anyway.
And it reminds me, Vanessa, so I do a lot in unconscious bias. The moment we label someone, we put them in a box and our brain gets lazy. So they're all being lazy thinkers.
Very lazy thinkers and not looking beyond, right? And then when women out other women, and this is part of the terror I had in re-releasing this book, but honestly, it wrote the new edition, it's almost like a completely new book, wrote itself. The terror was because I did have women that I spoke to, and I trusted advisors. I said, look, I'm thinking about re-releasing this book because this is what's changed. We're still not talking about it. Somebody needs to say something. What do you think? And I had really mixed reviews. Some women said to me, please talk about this. And I mean powerful women. I mean, Julie Bishop's in my book, okay? Powerful women who know what I'm talking about, who haven't gone public with their experiences, or who, as a result of their own experiences, are so conscious of not doing it that they are trying to create a world where women are lifted. And I love that, right? Others who have gone through it, who are so traumatised that they can't talk about it. They're still being treated, 10 years on. And these are powerful women, like power women. I can't mention, they wouldn't let me. Or women who haven't gone through it, and this is often the case, who say, again, they minimise the experience of the other woman. They say, look, you shouldn't be talking about this because when you do, this will actually disadvantage our growth and our ability to actually, strike a blow for women in the workforce. My response to that is, I don't think we could be doing any worse, quite frankly. So that may have been an argument 10 years ago, but the research would tell me, honey, that actually we're going to try something new because we ain't moving. So someone who said to me, you need to whisper, women need to whisper, I'm not sure how that's serving us. I think we need to take control of our behaviour, be really conscious and aware and build the skills to understand what this looks like, what the difference is between the different types of aggressions, and if we're in lead, and how to deal with the different types. We have a zero tolerance for it, absolute zero tolerance. I get rid of them. Bye. You're gonna bitch slap your sister. See you later. It's not okay on my watch. And the other thing is, at a systemic level, we need to lead organisations that are brave. We need to start talking about this stuff. I mean, come on. We're never going to either have women represented equally as gender parity or kind of organisational experience for all where we're enjoying it and thriving and working together, which is what we need to move the world forward. Because let's face it, we're facing existential threats. How are we going to solve for that? Together. Okay. All right. So this is why I wrote the book, Danette, for so many reasons, and it's really interesting. I've shared it with a few people. It's coming out formally on May 1st, but the response has been this: finally, thank you. Finally, somebody has had the bravery. I'm not going to lie, I have been absolutely terrified to write about this. I'm not really, it's really... But
I love that you're saying that too, because it's a scary topic, and yet if we don't talk about it, it's not going to change. So I love that you were brave enough, Vanessa, and I want to honour that bravery, because you could have gone, I don't want to do this.
I could have. And my publisher rang me and said, have you thought about re-releasing this? And I said, no. I said, no. Why? Why would I do that? Why would I put myself through that? And, it would be easier for me just to, I've done it, I've tried, let the dust collect, and that's it. But, a couple of other things happened as well, and I guess the frequency of women coming to me and seeing these women destroyed, actually, like capable, competent, amazing human beings destroyed. And I thought, you know what? I've got to go there again because it's still not being addressed. And so I'm going to give it one more crack and say, hey, everybody, the purpose is allyship, is to build allyship. I'm not here to, I don't know what a female version of castration is. I'm not here to divide women. Quite the contrary. I'm here to bring us together. My point in writing this book is to say, hey, here's what it looks like. I want to give you the skills to be able to name it. I want you to be able to have the bravery to face it and give you the knowledge to change it and the inspiration to change it. And if I can do that, then I can move on to my next one. But here's where I'm at right now, and let's talk about how we actually operationalise this.
Yes.
So let's do that, right? It's very much a proactive. And again, I want to be clear to all the listeners. I'm not saying that every woman needs to help another woman. I'm really not. Honestly, that's your choice. That's my choice, but I respect your choice. What I'm saying is, if you choose not to help, don't limit either. That's okay, but don't be a jerk about it. It's okay, but don't be a jerk. That's all I'm saying. There's a way to do it.
And Vanessa, we often quote Robin Sharma's quote about with better awareness comes better choices, with better choices comes better results. And what I love about your book is it's raising that awareness, because without that awareness, actually making change happen is near on impossible. So I'm glad that you did book number, came back and rewrote it, because I think that's really important. I would love to chat more about with the challenges that people are experiencing. How can we, and I don't like the word confronted, which I put in the question, but how can we sort of raise the awareness and then help people overcome what's currently obviously causing major problems in some workplaces?
Yeah, I think there are two levels. there's the individual level of turning things around, and I think it always starts with the I. And so maybe I'll start there and we can move to the systemic solutions, because that's where I play a lot as well, is always very much around the architect of systemic solution, because we want to go to root cause, right, which I've alluded to. But for the woman who maybe suspects that she is being bullied, for example, or is going through some kind of toxic workplace experience with another woman, the first thing to do is really figure out what it is and be really clear about that. So you've got, as I said before, you've got to be able to identify and name it, okay? And don't discount it. And so what you want to do is you want to start recording some of the behaviours. Is it something that is a once-off, or is it something that is on a continuous cycle? And I think this is really important. Do you feel like there's an intention to maim or harm, destroy, sabotage, limit you in some way? Have a look for the different types of behaviours. And if it is persistent and consistent, and it's more than once, that's what you have to recognise. Am I actually a target, or is this just a jerk at work, right? And look, if you are aspiring to be a leader or have any kind of decision-making authority, you're going to have to deal with jerks. They exist, okay? Doesn't mean they're a bully, they're just toxic people are all around us, okay? So figure out what is the real nature of it. And I can't mention who, but a very well-known Australian leader said to me, she went through a very public bullying through the media. So the media does this a lot. The media bullies people a lot. And I'm just going to say that. I will share with you, I also was bullied by the media over the last 18 months. I had a woman come after me 6 times who I've never met because of a book I wrote called Unreasonable Ambition, and I got to stand alongside an extraordinary man leading through the energy transition. She doesn't like him, clearly, and so she chose my book to come after me and wrote the most revolting stuff. That's bullying, right? Once, I get it, I'm a bit of fodder. Twice, 6 times, we got an issue. So anyway, I was curious to hear. Julie Bishop basically has been through the same thing many times, and I think so. This woman was sharing with me how I said, "Well, how did you deal with it? How did you know?" She said, "Well, it happened more than once. It kept happening. This media personality tried to take me down." And she said, "What I did is I treated it much like a lawyer prepares for a case." She said, "Once I'd figured out what was going on, so name it, what is actually happening, I am being bullied, this is persistent, there is a deliberate attempt to kind of smarmy me or libel me in some way, take me down, okay, for no apparent reason. Who can I talk to? How can I work through my emotions?" So the next piece is, how do I work through the emotions that this is triggering me? You don't want to go and seek support until you've actually worked through what's happening to you, the psychological impact, and built some strength. Because until you feel strong and secure in yourself, it's going to be very hard to be dispassionate, which is the next place we need to go. So often speaking to somebody that you trust, that knows you, maybe going and seeing someone independent, like a workplace psychologist like myself, for example, that can help you to figure out what's truly going on that's not within the organisation. Because, you never know who you speak to. Human resources, if you trust them, I will say, can be useful, but if you trust them, that is the caveat. It's not always the case. Again, I'm just being really honest. You've got to feel that level of trust because it's your career on the line. Line manager, maybe. Depends if you trust them. I usually would leave that a bit longer. But once you've actually talked it through, then, and reached a place where you understand what's going on and you do have the ability to be a little more dispassionate, then you need to remove the emotion and almost start treating it like you're preparing for trial and start recording the incidences. Record it. And this is what this amazing leader that I've mentioned before did. She started to record all the incidences and almost remove herself during that time emotionally so it wouldn't affect her while it was still going on. So she had an ability to do that, but because she was talking to people. Once you've done that, figure out what it is. Are you an actual target? Have I gotten it off my chest? Have I worked through the emotions associated with it? Because it's so easy for us to blame ourselves. Then you can start preparing your plan of attack. And that may be either dealing with the individual, depending on, or preparing the case. And then, depending on how you go with those two techniques, you may want to report it and escalate it, okay? Or, if it's unsafe to do so, this is what I tell women, leave. Because it really depends on, it really depends on the level of the person that's bullying you, the organisational culture, whether you're likely to, how you're likely to be perceived, or whether it's safe to speak out. If it isn't, then I'm going to tell you to move on. Move on, right? And here's the kicker. Don't be a mug. Get out before the hurricane hits. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So many women soldier on until they become a shadow of their former selves and they lose the energy to fight. You don't want it to get to that point. You need to be clever. Get the hell out if you are unable to turn the situation around and move on to greener pastures. Because when you're looking for another job, if you are not confident, if you don't show competence, if you are a mess, nobody's going to hire you. So that's my advice to women, is really go through those stages and don't let it get to a point where you say, like many women do, oh, you know, it's not really happening, or it'll sort itself out, or I'll be really nice to this person and it'll change. You know what? Keep it real, girlfriend. Really get an understanding of the situation, and if you've got nowhere to go with it, then the last recourse is to look for another job whilst you still believe in yourself. Because a big part and ramification of being bullied by another woman is you lose all your self-worth and confidence.
Yeah.
Okay. Do not let it get to that point. You're no good to anybody, or to your family if you've got families, or to your fur babies, whoever your loving people are. You're no good. And that's the big piece of advice I would say to our listeners is don't allow yourself to get to the point where you are fodder, cattle fodder, before you make a move, right? You've got to move if you can't turn it around. And so going through, and look, in the book I go through very detailed steps, very detailed, and you can always email me. My email's in there. I deliberately put my personal email for a reason.
Love that.
Because I really want to help as many women as I can. And look, I'll share with you something, Danette, and my book is about women on women, right? Because we don't talk about it. But I'll share a little insight. When I released that I was going to be writing this book, I had a lot of men reach out to me.
Wow.
Ah.
Tell me more.
Yeah, I had quite a number of men, and two in particular, very well known, very senior CEOs of ASX 20 organisations, call me and say, V, I've been bullied by a woman. Oh, really?
Wow. And
literally crying, bawling their eyes out, and I still haven't gotten over it. And if we go back to it again, why? Why does it affect us more when a woman does it? You know, it goes back to what I was saying, because we don't expect it from women. In fact, when you ask people how they feel when they are bullied by another woman, whether it be a man or a female, they'll describe, I felt sucker punched, blindsided, it was unexpected, which means we are less equipped to know what to do about it, because it makes us question all of our beliefs. Our gender stereotypes and beliefs. We don't expect it from women.
Look, I'm conscious of the time. So what I'd love to do is, can we give people, you know, whether it's individuals or organisations, just some things so that they can create supportive, inclusive cultures rather than what we've been talking about? Because really, the behaviour you're talking about, we want to get rid of. And as you said, create those beautiful, supportive environments.
And I think incivility can escalate, right? So incivility can escalate if left unchecked. And I think it's about, firstly, having a zero tolerance for this. And I want to encourage anybody to, if you see something like this, if you see incivility or bullying, call it out. Sometimes the person that's going through it might not have the strength to do so, might be frightened. So the more we can, as one, start to call out and acknowledge these types of behaviours that are toxic to our experience and to our ability to succeed and enjoy our working life and indeed our home life, that's where we need to start. And it's also about, if you see this going on, step in. If you're a leader, step in. Find out what's going on. Make sure that you are encouraging women to work together. Step in if there's an incident that's not right. If somebody's bad-mouthing somebody to you, another woman, if they're gaslighting them and if they're saying nasty things, don't let them. It starts with us stopping. And that's a big part of this. It's also about, and look, this is the one request I asked from all the women and men at Davos this year, and I think there were about 300 people in the room, and then we had millions on live stream. I said, if you can commit, the bigger play here is if you can commit to mentoring or lifting at least one woman per year. One woman per year. How hard is that?
Not hard at all.
Imagine where we would be. We have to lead like that. We have to focus on that. Lift, don't limit.
Yeah.
And make really concerted efforts to include women in things, to bring the next level up with us, to create the kind of cultures and environments where toxicity is not tolerated, where we need to focus on where allyship is celebrated and encouraged at all levels. So people are rewarded for allyship, people are rewarded for collaboration, people are recognised for those behaviours, for being inclusive, for standing up when and using their voice, even if it shakes them when they're frightened, when something's wrong. Don't turn a blind eye. Bystander effect is the same as being a culprit.
Yeah.
There's the reality. If you walk by something, and you tolerate it, it means you accept it. Don't do that. Yeah. If we're all conscious, it's going to change the play and the game for us all. Yeah. And we're all going to be a lot happier. But we really do need to grow a pair on this one.
I love that. So, Vanessa, 2 more questions. And my next one is just, we're always curious with authors what their writing process is. So just nothing to do with the book so much as how do you write? Just listeners and viewers always love that.
Thank you. So the writing process starts with something that upsets me. Honestly, because to be able to spend a year or 2 writing a book, it needs to be something that you're very motivated to speak about, all right? And normally with me, it's an injustice or somebody's in pain, right? So for Unreasonable Ambition, it was watching leaders try to navigate a very complex business context, a life of uncertainty and existential challenges, and not believing that they could do it, and me knowing that they could. And so I wrote the book to help them, say, you know what, get out of your own way, people. You actually are very competent. You've got the mindset. You've been here before, believe it or not. You can handle this. And so the first book was to say, here are the psychological hacks to be able to navigate uncertainty as a leader, bring your organisation with you, motivate your people, and, leave your competition in the dust. You've got this. Because I know how to do it at scale. Tips, I'm giving it to you. Read it. So that's the first one, just trying to help people. The second one was just the injustice of it all and realising that this topic was not something that was being overlooked, and it's like staring at me. Come on, how can I help you get out of this funk? How can I help people get out of this painful situation? And so the way I go about it is once I have the idea, I name it, and then I literally put together a skeleton. So I brainstorm all the different elements of the book. It's usually post-it notes all over my pool house, which is where I do my writing. And I structure it much like do a lot of research. I mean, reading, research, and as I read, I get a post-it. Okay, talk about this element. Bang. So I have big flip charts all over, the key themes, why the world needs to hear about it, who's the target audience, what am I trying to say, how would this help? So I write that first, what's my vision? And then here are the key elements that I'm going to focus on. And so much like my many research dissertations in the past, it's almost like a research project, honestly, when I write. Different from, writing a book that's fiction. Non-fiction's quite different. So when you're writing a business book or a psychology book, it's quite different. Probably easier, I would say, than writing fiction because you've got research. You've got a lot of stuff to back up. And that's another part is I won't say something to you if I can't substantiate it. Because I know the topics that I talk about, whether it be psychological evidence, so obviously, or research evidence from multiple disciplines, so I tend to work on a multidisciplinary inspiration point, I can back up anything I say to you. You could ask me right now, you wrote this line, how dare you? I'll say, well, actually, here you go. So I think when you're writing about controversial topics, you've got to be able to ground it in something. And so everything in the sisterhood paradox and unreasonable ambition, I can prove it. So it's not just me kind of on a whim saying, today I'm going to talk about, well, actually, no, here it is. And I'm a psychologist.
Yeah.
Right? So I understand the machinations of it. So I've been doing it. And I have anecdotal evidence as well. So this is how I do it. And then I work through each chapter. I usually can't write until I have the name of it. I need the name of the book first.
Love that.
So that can stump me for a while, actually. Sometimes if I don't have the name, I really struggle to, because the name means that then you write to the name. Another thing that I do, which I don't know if it's creepy or not, but I'll share with your listeners. This might be, don't think I'm creepy.
How you preface that?
I think author voice, developing an author voice and a unique style and voice is quite important. I don't want to talk like a professor. I am a professor, but I don't talk like one. I do professoring stuff. But if I was to talk to you as a professor, it wouldn't reach the people I want to reach. I need to speak to you as if I'm having a conversation. So what I do is I print up the photos of clients that I'm working with to whom I'm directing the conversation. So maybe I've got, what's a fictitious name? Kerry, for example. Kerry that I'm working with, she's an executive. She's been in oil and gas for 30 years and she is a naysayer. So she's against me. So I'll have people who support me and people who are against me on the wall. So I'll put Kerry's photo up on my wall and then I'll put a supporter up. So it might be Jacqueline. And so every time I write, I bring the two perspectives. So I'm going to write to Jacqueline because she's my person, but I need to be able to substantiate for Kerry so she can't take me down.
Love that technique. I've not heard that before, Vanessa.
That's what I do. I write to real people.
Yeah.
So that I don't sound like a boffin. And it's been wonderful. The feedback I had, particularly from Unreasonable Ambition, was I felt like I was in the room with you.
Nice.
And you were just talking to me in a coaching session or a consulting session or a strategy session or a culture session or a workshop. It actually felt like I had you in the room. And as a result of that, quite a few of my clients said, V, we will pay for you to do an audio version of Unreasonable Ambition.
Awesome.
And they listen to it over and over. We want to hear you speaking, which is unnerving, but great. But like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to hear myself. And I've only listened to it once.
Okay. I was going to say, we're right at the tail end of the podcast. So obviously we're going to have listeners and viewers that want to reach out to you. So where are the best places for them to find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, so it's just Vanessa Vershaw on LinkedIn, or my website, www.vanessavershaw.com. They're the easiest ways. I'm also on Facebook under my name, and I also have an Instagram under Vanessa Vershaw as well. We also have a beautiful Instagram and also subscribers list called Ambitious Minds, and that's also where I add other tidbits and I interview other leaders and I talk about a whole range of topics, including my Unreasonable Ambition book, because that's a big one as well, is how do we get our mindsets ready for the challenge that is here right now, and then going more into the sisterhood paradox, which is a much more specific experience, very tailored and unique to people specifically going through it that want to upskill in being able to navigate it successfully. So there's something for everybody on those channels.
I love that. Well, can I say, Vanessa, thank you so much. I can't wait to read your book. And to all of our listeners and viewers, have a magical week.